This is our project called Wheeler Farms. We make wine in the winery for our brand Vicendo, for Wheeler Farms, and also for other winemakers. We're a custom crush facility. So a little bit later I can tell you something about the water conserving methods that we've used and also the plants. But I would love to, because it's hot today, just turn everything over to Steve Mathiasen, Miguel Luna, and Pete Richmond. The latter two from Silverado, and I think everybody probably knows Steve. So, welcome.
So the purpose of this visit is to start with planning a vineyard to be organically farmed from the beginning. So from trellis system, spacing, and everything that would goes into planning for organic vineyards. So for this vineyard, we can start with vine spacing. So the vines are 6.5 feet. Oh, we should start with rootstock, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, so we have, this is 03916 because we have nematode problems in these soils. So we didn't want to use any nematicide or anything to nuke the soil. So it's planted in 03916. Spacing is 6.5 feet between vines. That helps with under vine cultivation since we're not going to be using any herbicides. So whatever equipment we want to use, we're able to get it in under the vine before the hydraulic kicks them out. We still do some shovel work. We do a little bit of shovel work that is mainly cosmetics. For the most part, you could do it just with mechanical. And then vine spacing, 7 feet wide, so we can do all the pest management with tractors as well. Just better coverage than doing backpack spraying if you go too narrow and you're not able to use tractors. Trellis system, 3 sets of wires, double wires on every space, and cross arms. So we have 2 wires here, 2 and 2, to be able to open up the canopies as we do the shoot tucking and positioning. As we move up during the season, we use this biodegradable clips just to keep the 2 wires close in the center where they can get pretty wide and then the shoots start falling in. So we want to keep everything straight up, better air penetration, sun exposure, and shading in the fruit zone. If we run into a year where the mildew pressure is pretty high and we have problems, we can always remove more leaves than ideal and still have pretty good shade by having this canopy system.
So, I mean, because the overarching philosophy, you know, with organic farming is that you're trying to plan ahead and create systems that are self-managing, that you prevent problems and prevent the need for continual inputs. So, so all the things Miguel is going through is vineyard design for under vine cultivation, vineyard design for good spray penetration. It's good best management practices, but but with organic you don't have that get out of jail free card of the chemicals, so you don't have that leeway, and so we try to design from the get-go a vineyard that can be farmed organically. It's not going to have the problems. So like starting all the way back in soil prep, where we are here in the sort of the St. Helena, Rutherford area has been farmed for a long time. So there's a lot of nematode pressure in this whole neighborhood, a lot of fan leaf in the neighborhood, and so from the get-go, it's like, well, let's use 03916. There's, rather than say, well, let's fumigate the soil and then go organic. We're not going organic for the name. It's a philosophy. It's a value, and so we don't want to fumigate the soil and then go organic. We want to farm organically, and so that means using a resistant rootstock. It's just basic integrated pest management. Is use resistant plant materials where you can. It also means that that we want to create a self-sufficient vine that has a good, healthy root system. So that means that we study the soils in advance and decide how much deep tillage we need, but to do enough deep tillage to ensure that we have a nice, deep, well-branched root system so that the plant can use to get its own water, get its own fertility, not be reliant on inputs for the life of the vineyard. And there's so much of it. There's this philosophy in the viticulture world right now that's been, well, right now for the last decade or so, or a little long, of the, minimal pre-plant. Well, there's a couple of different philosophies that are going around. Let's say the one from 10 years ago with the one wing tine down the row, shallow. Keep a small little vine and then you just feed it along, boom, 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 have total control. That's, that setting up a vineyard to be hydroponic isn't really the principle of organic farming. There's the saying is feed the soil, not the plant. So we don't want to create it. We want to create a vineyard that we're not going to need to farm hydroponically. We want it to be, our irrigation should be supplementary or just in case, not something that it's reliant on. And same thing with fertilizer. Ideally, we won't use any fertilizers. Ideally, our nitrogen comes from our cover crop, and our root system is big enough that the micros and the phosphorus, potassium can be gathered from the soil itself. So we don't like the restricted little tillage. We want to do enough tillage as necessary to open this full soil up so that the roots can spread out and down. Number one, and then there's a lot of conversations right now that are coming from a more sort of organic mentality of not doing deep tillage because you want to respect the soil quality and the soil strata and the life in the soil. The problem is this vineyard is going to be here for hopefully many decades, and we only have one chance at opening the soil up, and we know that it's hard on the soil. We know it's not ideal. But my experience is with inadequate soil prep, over time you have non-uniformity, and then you have areas, either the whole vineyard or parts of the vineyard, that you're fighting for the life of the vineyard. And rather than be applying compost to the weak areas for the life of the vineyard and watering it more and using fish emulsion, I would rather that we prep the soil properly the first time, even though it's not the greatest thing for the soil to be deep ripped, so we can get our roots down, and then for the life of the vineyard, it's less inputs and it's more even and just a healthier, stronger vineyard. So that's kind of the overarching philosophy.
What about the timing? Your idea on timing?
Yeah, so timing on when we do the tillage that's one of the on one of the earlier groups was asked what's the new technology in tillage, and the biggest thing was actually the switch from that we used to say you got to always till in the fall. Like it used to be, I remember when we developed vineyards, you'd actually try to dry the ground out so that in the fall it was as dry as possible, so you'd shatter the soil. And the new way of thinking is that you don't want to shatter the soil. That's the last thing we want to do is shatter the soil, because if the soil turns, the soil turns into dust, it's just totally lost its structure, and so it doesn't breathe. As soon as water gets there, it's going to seal up. Water's not going to go in, air is not going to go in. So we switched to doing, when we do the deep tillage, we try to do it, watch the soil moisture and do it, they call it the plastic limit, so it's when it no longer smears, it starts crumbling, but it still has moisture in it so that you can get through and you hopefully you don't break they call it the aggregate stability, the little chocolate cake crumbs. We want those to stay together, so when we draw the ripper shanks through there, you've opened the soil up, but all the little crumbs are still intact. And so that's the new way of thinking on ripping. So it tends to be more late spring, early summer than at the end of the season. I like the wing as well, but the wing's not a replacement for going deep and going a couple of directions. The wing just adds to, and you do an even better job. But we still got to get down there and we got to break it up. So it's setting it up, and a lot of the backhoe pits, and understanding your soil, understanding, if you want, if it needs lime, just put the lime in, because so the plant, again, this one-shot deal of adding the lime, and then hopefully the soil pH is balanced and the plant can draw its own nutrients for the life of the vineyard. Compost, we put a lot of compost on pre-plant, 20 tons, 30 tons even sometimes, depending on what we think of the soil, but then ideally we won't apply much, if any, compost again after that, because we'll get it from our cover crop. So we just give the vine, help repair the soil with compost from the ripping and get the vines off to a good start, and then once they're growing, they're growing. Rootstocks, something that's strong enough that, again, we try to get away from the weak rootstocks that you're required to water and fertilize and till into stronger rootstocks that can fend for themselves. Also, it's a question of planning for the future for our water availability. We don't know what water is going to be like 20 years down the road from now, but the chances are there's not going to be as much of it. So we have to plan for that with the rootstock choice. And use cover crops for the time being to keep the balance.
So you're ripping for the prep in order to open up the roots to go deep. The cultivating that you're doing after that on an annual basis is mostly for the cover crop then? Or I mean, what's, in other words, why are you tilling it all after you've done the initial rip that you're trying to put the roots down?
Okay.
And so no-till, you rejected the idea of no-till?
No. No, haven't gotten to there yet. We're just in year one.
Oh, I see, okay.
So the question was, what about tilling down the road? And in our the perfect scenario, if everything works according to plan, is we set up the vineyard so that, and we may not need deep ripping, but we have to do backhoe pits and see what it needs. If it needs it, we're going to do it. Okay, there's no one size fits all. But the goal is loosen the soil so that we get a deep root system. Perfect world down the road, if we were to just, perfect sustainability, we end up with vines that are perfectly balanced, nice even production of fruit, no tillage, no irrigation, no fertilization. That's the goal. And we plant our insectary plants, and hopefully that takes care of the insects, and the whole thing just hums along. Yeah, that's the goal. So tillage down the middle of the row is, oh shit, we don't have enough vigor, we have to till. And so this vineyard, we are going to switch to no-till this year. And then because this is a vigorous vineyard, and it's time to tamp it down. Is that we're going to cruising altitude, and we want to settle at 30,000 foot cruising altitude, and these vines on this rootstock in this deep soil have the chance to go like that. And we don't want to do that. We want to go like that. So we're trying to get ahead of it a little bit so we can taper off.
Which cover crop do you guys use?
Well, it all depends. We're moving to a sheep's fescue, hard fescue mix that we'll mow, and we'll just cultivate under the vines.
Miguel, can you talk about irrigation here?
We haven't irrigated this year. So you can see these vines are growing. This is deep soil, so no 3916s. The vines are going to be vigorous. So that's one of the choices you make when you decide to go organic, right? So by using this rootstock, we're going to have higher vigor, but it's the only option to go with the nematodes. So then you have to figure a way to balance the vigor of the vines with cultural practices. So like one of the things we've been doing here, even though these are first year cordons, we are leaving every position. So even though they're going to be cordon trained, we're not removing positions and training the spurs now, where you would go 1, 1, 1. So by leaving everyone, the shoots are still reaching to the top. So we'll start selecting the positions next year when we start pruning, and we'll have ideal canes to do our extensions. So we're not going to have bull canes with long internodes that are going to make your positions be 10 inches apart. So we're leaving everything for now. We're leaving more crop than we would on a vineyard of this age. We're already going with 2 clusters if they're reaching this height. So we're doing 2 clusters here, 1, and then nothing. On a regular vineyard where the vigor is not as strong as here, we would go 1 or nothing. So if it reached here, we would have 1 cluster. Anything below, we wouldn't leave any fruit. But here can handle it.
So how does that apply to organic? And the way that this viticulture applies to organic farming is we want a stronger rootstock so that it can be, in this case it's nematode tolerant, but even if we didn't have nematode issues, we'd want a slightly stronger rootstock so it's more self-sufficient for the life of the vineyard. But we have to, and that's part of organic farming, but then we have to viticulturally deal with that vigor as the vineyard's getting established. And so we have to change things from the normal way of thinking to how do you grow a strong rootstock to be a balanced vine.
What are you using for undervine cultivation for the weeds?
We did a Graminia pass, and then we did a Clemens knife for a second pass.
Are you planning on doing the Graminia with the permanent cover crop? Or I was just curious about.
Yeah, on their vine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you guys seed under vine with something that's easy for the Germania?
We
or
didn't seed under vine.
or that makes it
We
easier
haven't
for
yet.
timing window?
That's
Resident vegetation down under the vine.
I see across the street they're using every single spur as a permanent spur, and then they're suckering the interior shoot and leaving the exterior shoot as a permanent spur. Is that something you guys will do here, or will you guys go with a traditional spur position at every 4-inch, 6-inch
traditional.
tradition?
Yeah. Wait, want the shade?
Sure. Any questions that relate to the vineyard?
What
Before we move to the shade?
What depth did you guys rip this when you guys planted?
Well, if I remember right, we were down around 4 feet because it gets really cobbly down there, and there was no need to go any deeper. We didn't want to bring a bunch of rocks up, and it was a waste. So I think it was around 4 feet to get rid of the old tractor compaction. So that's what I mean. There's no one size fits all. The point is you have to monitor. That's another organic farming. You have to look first, monitor, etc., and then make your decisions. And so we always look at the soil in a bunch of different locations, and then try to figure out what it's going to need, basically. And so, we would have gone 6 feet if we needed to go 6 feet. We would have gone 3 feet if we would have needed to go 3 feet. As long as we know we want to get the roots all the way down.
Is there any other rootstock you guys would consider? Or is it old 3916?
Well, here we had our we could have fumigated and tried to go with a different rootstock. So other than that, we didn't have a lot of options. We don't feel like there's enough. For us, we weren't comfortable taking the risk with the GRN rootstocks yet on this whole block. If we were a much bigger operation, we'd be putting GRN in a block here or there and watching it and learning, but we had one shot at it, so we decided to go with 03916. If you didn't have nematodes, maybe it'd be 110R. We don't go all the way to like crazy bigger. These are deeper soils with water. The idea is we're just kind of starting to err to like a notch higher on bigger than what the conventional wisdom would have been for the last decade, basically.
Do you think you'll irrigate this year?
We might put a little water on it for raising. The younger vines get to see how they go. We just right now we're just learning it and watching. We're watching the neutron probe has been going dick, 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 dick every week. Now, neutron probe's all the way at the bottom. We use Zane as a coney. I anticipate next week it's gonna all of a sudden be like not at the bottom anymore, and he's gonna in his notes say that he recalibrated our site. So we're just still learning basically. But we're watching. But we want them to be on the stress side because these are strong vines. And it's 03916. If they need to harden off, or you don't want to. What if you have a cold winter? You don't want to get into crown gall.
What are your thoughts on cane pruning 03916, like a quadrilateral, or is pretty much cordon pretty much what you guys recommend?
The spacing here between vines is pretty long to have canes that long, so we're more comfortable with cordons.
And we don't need the production that you would get from cane pruning.
What's your goal tons per acre here?
We don't really look at. Love to have 5 tons per acre, but we don't have a goal. Everything has to be vine balance, shoot by shoot. So maybe it's gonna be 5, maybe it's gonna be 4. When it's fully established, if it ends up at 3, then I'll probably get fired because not that 3 is a perfect tons per acre in a lot of situations, but this is a brand new vineyard. We're trying to set it up. There's no reason we can't be at 5 tons per acre of great quality.
But you know that what Miguel mentioned with the 0, 1, 2, that'll be consistent throughout. So it's a shoot by shoot decision, and then whatever the tonnage is.
Vine balance. We're growing balanced vines. We're going to do everything shoot by shoot, and then the tonnage is what it is. So we don't have like a spreadsheet. To me, I call it spreadsheet-itis. Farming by spreadsheet is not the recipe for great quality or even great economics, in my opinion. I've worked in so many corporate situations where everything's by spreadsheet, and you could actually make more money if you actually stuck with our good old viticulture principles instead of trying to force the vineyard into a spreadsheet cell.
What quality do you guys have here?
You remember that it's
169 and 30.
yeah.
This is our favorite here.
Yeah. Huh?
What is it? Is it
We call it Kixia.
Kixie?
Kixia.
Kixia. And what do you do about it?
We grow it
Well-
really well. We can grow it really well.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
The summer
as soon as you water, this is going to go.
It has that little taproot. The Clemens takes care of it pretty well. It's not like field bindweed where it just comes right back on you. But I just try to keep it. It's another kind of organic principle, right? Is pest management, not pest control. And so this Kixia is spread all over the place now, and so we try to keep it at a dull roar. It doesn't seem like it's that competitive, and so so if you have a little bit here and there, I just try to keep at it and keep it so that it's not taking the place over and call it good, basically, because you'd be out here with shovels non-stop. It's just kind of it's relatively new. John Roncaroni thought that it came in with all the erosion straw going on in the 90s. Yeah, but if you can get rice straw, it's way better from not getting weeds in.
You were speaking about deep tillage when you're planting a new vineyard and thinking about for the future with limited water resources. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on subsurface drip irrigation?
Well, it's great, but there's unless someone can enlighten me and I'm out of date. The last time I looked at it, you had the issue organically because the emitters are impregnated with treflan, so the roots don't grow into them. And so unless someone can enlighten that that's not the case anymore, that's been a problem with organic farming, with subsurface drip.
Is the double emitter something you guys do at all your vineyards, or just this one in particular, or is it plant specific, or?
When you say double emitter,
You have one
to
emitter
provide-
on both sides. Is that something you guys do on all your vineyards, or?
depends on the spacing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, like, and generally, we have 2 drip hoses as well in all vineyards. This one, second drip hose hasn't been put on yet.
Well, we have risers at the end.
Yeah.
Is compaction by tractor passes an issue both in an organic vineyard and just generally? Do you think about that when you're planning out strategy?
It's an issue generally, and especially in organic vineyards when you're relying on the fertility of the soil. So you're not hydroponically you're fertilizing underneath your vines. You need the whole root system. It's amazing how often an older vineyard you go through and rip the tractor pass up, and all of a sudden the vines go whoop, and they need less water, less fertility. So it's a big deal, is the tractor compaction. So like in the spring, if you have low ground pressure tractors, great, like spraying with a crawler or what have you. But otherwise, I would rather take my chances with mildew than send a tractor through and compact the soil until it's dry enough that you're not going to have an issue with that. The same thing with plow pans. So we want to rotate. If we're cultivating, spade 1 year, then we might go to disking. Then maybe so you're rotating around your plow pan, and you're thinking and you're being careful not to till when the soil is too dry, and really, or too wet and slicking. So that so you have to be constantly thinking about that. But I think with organic, it's a much bigger deal because, again, the soil, it's the plant's supposed to be self-sufficient. So if you just put a wall for the roots so they can't get over, then you're underutilizing your soil.
Can you talk about the spray program here? What's your interval? Given this area of, you would think, low mildew pressure?
Very low. Yeah, our intervals are like 15 days.
15 days?
Yeah. And we've never had it. They're relatively young, so the canopies are not super thick. But
Yeah. And we like integrated pest management is that has a term economic threshold, right? And we don't tend to apply that as an industry to powdery mildew. People are looking for zero tolerance on powdery mildew, and if we see a little tiny bit of mildew here and there, I'm not worried about it. You know, I mean, it means that we're in that sweet spot. You know, if it's you know, people just like think the sky's falling if you can find a berry or two of mildew here and there, and it's kind of ridiculous, really. I mean, a berry here or there is not going to hurt anything, and so we try to find that, what's that edge? I don't want, you know, I mean, you know, you have to be monitoring. You can't be stupid about it, but if that's the work, right, of farming and managing the mildew. It's easy to sit in your office and just write work orders and spray again, but that's not integrated pest management.